Welcome. So I can't see any of the other people or see how many people are here. So just welcome everyone to By Any Other Name, a workshop exploring the language used to describe geographic relationship to place in Appalachia. Let me move through the slides right now. You might hear my dog bark occasionally in the background. Our workshop agenda today, we've got the workshop agenda and goals that I'm going over the agenda now. Land acknowledgement. We'll do some introductions to get to know one another and then go into a breakout to discuss term collecting that's really dependent on how many folks make it to the workshop. We'll report out in the main room and then discuss that report out for 10 minutes and then go back to breakout rooms and really talk through the terms that we've collected, affirm, refine, and generate more terms, come back and report that out and discuss those terms. The impetus for the workshop, okay, I know this one's mine. The impetus for this workshop was through the years, I was a leaver of Appalachia, returner, there were all these terms. And then last summer, I was watching the documentary Moundsville, and they had someone they were interviewing there refer to herself as a refugee. She had left and she felt like she could not return to Appalachia for various reasons. And I thought that was really interesting because I have felt like that at different points in my life, but I also felt like the term refugee was loaded in a way. Like I didn't want to dismiss or lessen the experience of actual refugees by using that term for just, someone who feels like it's hard to go home sometimes. And that's not dismissing her experience either. I just thought that was a really interesting term to try to use there. But it also felt reaching in a way. So I was in a conversation with Cassie about this, who is a transplant is maybe one term to use in terms of her relationship to Appalachia. And yeah, we developed this workshop. So that was really the impetus, was thinking through like what we call ourselves and one another in relation to Appalachia.
Cassie. Yeah, so thank you. So that really sparked in us an idea for this workshop where we thought, what if we started to collect and really articulate the various terminology that is used to think about geographic and identity relationships to the Appalachian region, and start to just take some time to review them, to interrogate them, to see which ones we want to lift up and affirm, which ones are giving us some trouble or having some sticking points, or maybe have these kind of valences that we want to look at a little bit closer, and also to identify some gaps. What are some experiences that are not really being talked about, or which ones don't really have terms that help us to signal that in, popular discourse or in academic work? So we're thinking about a range of applications for these terms and really coming at it quite broadly in order to just start thinking about it together with you guys today.
Should I go to the next slide? Is that where we're at?
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. So before we get started, we just wanted to acknowledge that our capacity to be here together today is based upon the settlement of stolen Indigenous lands that were occupied through broken treaties and the forced removal of Indigenous nations across the Appalachian region. And specifically for me, I'm using resources from The Ohio State University, a land-grant institution that has profited from these stolen lands. And so I wanted to recognize that Ohio State occupies the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. And specifically that the university resides on land ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And we want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical contexts that have and continue to affect the Indigenous peoples of this land. And recently I was at a webinar on moving beyond land acknowledgements and thinking about sharing information that can lead to action and support for Indigenous reclamation of lands and sovereignty. And so there are just a couple resources here. The Yellowhead Institute created the Land Back paper, which is that first link. And the podcast Unreserved has a really excellent episode on what it means to give land back to Indigenous communities. And I'm done there.
Thank you. All right, introductions. Hi, everyone. I am Amanda Page. We'll just go through introductions. I'll keep this slide up so you can refer to it as you're going through the things that we thought we might speak to in the introductions. The affiliation, your location, and a one word that you feel expresses an aspect of your relationship to the Appalachian region or your current place of residence, and what that term means to you. Again, I'm Amanda Page. I am affiliated with Mount Carmel College of Nursing for the purposes of today, and Scioto Literary, an organization, nonprofit organization that serves Scioto and surrounding counties. I'm coming into this workshop today from Worthington, Ohio, because I live and teach in Columbus, but also serve Scioto County because I'm from the Portsmouth area, and which creates kind of an interesting dual relationship. I feel very like Midwestern Appalachian, like I'm just really starting to explore what that means, the convergence of those two regions, and what that means for me as a person who lives at that convergence. And that one word that expresses that, I mean, I'm a leaver. I left the Appalachian region to live here, but I like to say that there are a lot of us here in Columbus who, came up Route 23 for the reading, routing, and Route 23 and have made lives here. We're close, but not there. So in that respect, leaver is the only really term I have for that. Cassie.
Yep, I'll go next. And as folks introduce themselves, as we get to you guys, feel free to turn on your camera while you're introducing yourself if that works for you. If not, that's okay. And we can popcorn so that we can just move through the introduction. So at the end of your intro, just go ahead and pass it to somebody else. My name is Cassie Rosita Patterson, and I am the Associate Director of the Center for Folklore Studies at Ohio State University, as well as the Executive Director of Southern Ohio Folklife, a nonprofit based in Scioto County, but serving the Southern Ohio region. And I'm based in Scioto County now. I moved here permanently in July, which I'm very excited about. And so I would say that my relationship to place right now to the Appalachian region is a newcomer. I am a new resident, and I'm really excited about what it will mean to learn from my neighbors and fellow Scioto Countyans and Southern Ohioans over however long I'm here. And I would like to pass it to Andrew Fight.
Okay. Hey, I'm Andrew Fight. I'm a professor of history at Shawnee State University in Portsmouth, Ohio. I'm the director of our Digital Appalachian Studies program, which is a certificate program. I'm also the coordinator of the history program at Shawnee State, and I direct the Digital History Lab. Let's see. Location, right, so Portsmouth is due south of Columbus. We're on the Ohio River. We're in Scioto County, and I live out in the Shawnee State Forest. I think newcomer is the term that has been applied to me here. I didn't grow up in Ohio. I grew up down in Georgia, north of Atlanta. But I've lived here since 2001, so we're going on 20 years, and I'm still a newcomer. Right. So let's see. I want to pass this to Jordan Lovejoy.
All right. Hi, my name's Jordan Lovejoy. I'm a grad student at Ohio State. I'm currently in Columbus, though I still very much have ties to my home place, which is in Wyoming County in southern West Virginia. I'm from a holler outside of Pineville. And one word that maybe expresses my relationship to Appalachia is optimistic. I think I'm very optimistic for the future of our place and what it can be, what it hasn't been quite yet, but what it might still become. And I will pass it to James King.
James, if you're participating, you might want to unmute.
Or maybe I could pass it to someone else and James can go later on. So I will pass it to Sophia Enriquez.
Hey everyone. Thanks Cassie and Amanda for leading this workshop. My name is Sophia Enriquez. I am currently finishing a PhD at Ohio State University, where I have been for the past 5 years, but am actually currently based out of my hometown, which is in Clermont County, Ohio, which is a southern, an Appalachian county in southern Ohio. I've also spent time working. I did my undergraduate degree in West Virginia at West Virginia University, and will soon be relocating for a job also in the region. So I would say perhaps as someone who's kind of bopped around but stayed kind of central and also straddled some of the same kind of borders that Amanda was talking about between sort of culturally Midwestern Ohio and Appalachian Ohio. I would say my relationship to Appalachia is one that has to do with borders and bridges, bridging my experiences from other places that I've lived and worked, and the people that I've gotten to know there. So thanks all for the opportunity to share.
And who would you like to pass it to?
Oh, yes. I will pass the mic to, my team's a little slow loading, to Shelly.
So my name is Shelly Caldwell. I am with Radford University. I currently work in housing, which is somewhat unrelated, but I did get my master's degree in history just recently, and did my dissertation, not my dissertation, good grief, no, my thesis in Appalachian history. So my location, I actually live near Radford University, which, if you don't know where that is in Southwest Virginia. We're about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on traffic, from Virginia Tech. And I live in a small little farm town near there. And one word that expresses my relationship with Appalachia, other than home, because I've lived here in this same little town my whole life, home, and I guess we all have a conflicting relationship with home. It's a love-hate relationship sometimes. I love living here. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I'm currently trying to find jobs in Appalachia, like teaching jobs, which has proven to be a little harder than I thought it would be. I don't know if we need to blame that on the pandemic or fewer schools than there are in other regions. But and then I don't want to say hate, but it can be frustrating sometimes, like from a diversity aspect. For here, we are a little blessed that we've got like Virginia Tech and Radford that pulls in people from all walks of life from all around the world. But just growing up here, it was a very, very much just, you know, I don't want to say a white experience, but there was no diversity in my high school. So sometimes that can be a little frustrating. And then, sorry, I'm a latecomer. I am going to pass it to, oh gosh. Let's see. Who hasn't gone yet?
I think Maria and
Okay, I was gonna say Maria or Maria, so if Maria wants to go.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Maria. I am a graduate student at the City University of New York. Currently live in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm originally from Bulgaria. And I visited West Virginia several times since I've been here. I came here for college, and it's not really a one word, but I felt the most at home in the States when I first visited West Virginia. So it kind of feels like a home away from home, even though I'm technically an outsider. So yeah, I think that's my relationship. And let me see. Mary Thomas, have you gone? I guess not. And Buddy, I think it's somebody who hasn't gone. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name.
looks like maybe Laura Schaefer hasn't gone. Or let's
Hi,
see. Go ahead.
sorry. Hi, I'm Buddhi Gawali. I'm from Kentucky. I I'm a faculty here in Kentucky State University, and I am currently staying in Lexington. I commute, but we have a few research projects in Appalachian region in Eastern Kentucky. We're looking into the impacts of surface mine activities on the, especially on the local microclimate, ecosystem change, and also quality of life. This is the grant that some funded from the USDA. So we're looking at different aspects of the quality of life, subjective well-being, and jobs, and some of their connection with the nature and their trust and other to local agencies and government and universities and their role in this area for the economic development and some of the place-based. We're using GIS mapping and looking into particular aspects of their connection, how that varies based on their where they live to the mining activities. Thank you.
Buddy, would you like to share a word that expresses your relationship to the Appalachian region?
Yes, right now I still feel like I'm an outsider. I'm not well connected because of the distance and some of the right now the COVID is impacting. But I would say as an outside researcher, trying to understand the history, their different culture and how they're connected and their migration and socio-demographic aspects. So I'm looking from outside. I would not say like I'm still not attached the way that I feel like I need to do a lot to know these communities. I think that I don't know if I answered that question.
Yes, thank you so much. And is there anybody else that hasn't gone that would like to introduce themselves?
I can go.
Thanks, Carrie.
So, hi, my name is Mina. My pronouns are they and them. I'm a Marshall University public relations student and currently acting as your backup tech as an intern with the ASA. So therefore I'm in Huntington. And one word that might express my relationship might be homegrown. I was born here, I live here, and that comes with a lot of joys and a lot of pains. So yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think I saw Carrie Curley had put their hand up as well.
Hey, everybody, I'm Carrie Curley, obviously, sorry. And I am adjunct at Appalachian State, and I teach Appalachian Studies. I have a master's degree in Appalachian Studies from Appalachian State. I also teach at several community colleges, or have taught, around the western North Carolina and the mountain region. I also teach in other colleges in the first year seminar programs, which I teach courses, I design based on Appalachian literature. I currently working on some projects. What my big one is collecting oral histories, family oral histories in the Blue Ridge region, but I'd like to expand that out. Now, my word is sort of a phrase, I guess. I consider myself a prodigal son, if I can borrow a term from the Christian Bible. I was grew up here. I live in Boone, North Carolina. I grew up in the region. I left when I was 17. I found out if your mom would sign for you to join the Army, they would let you come in, and I talked her into it, and I left when I was 17. I always missed it. Lived in Alaska for years. Really loved Alaska, but this is home, and I came back about 10 years ago. I've been teaching now in Appalachian Studies in one form or another for 8 years, and really glad to be here. Looking forward to this. I always try to stress the sense of place and so forth in my classes, like a lot of us do. But I'm really glad when I saw this on the list, I was really glad y'all were doing this. So thank you. I don't know if anyone else wants to go or where we're at there.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I see Jeremy maybe hasn't gone yet. I see you trying to talk, Jeremy, but we can't hear you even though you're unmuted for some reason. Jeremy, we can't hear you, so would you like to put your intro in the chat so that we can read it there? And let's see, has anybody else not gone that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, so let's keep an eye on the chat for Jeremy's intro, and then anybody else who would like to share their intro but wasn't able to do it, please just go ahead and put it in the chat for us. And Amanda, I think we can go ahead and move to the next thing.
Will do. Here we go. Maybe. What's going on? Here we go. All right. Existing terminology. This is where we're going to have some fun. I loved hearing what people were saying about. I was taking notes quickly while people were introducing themselves. I just love what's already been talked about. This is where we're going to do our first small group breakout. Where we will discuss the terms, like just what we've been talking about, words and phrases you've heard or that you use to describe geographic and identity relations to Appalachia region. And then we have some examples here. Brain drain, brain gain. I mean, I guess in a really interesting way, like I would represent brain drain and Cassie would represent brain gain. Ex-Appalachian, stayer, returner, boomeranger, homecomer, Appalachian, Mexalachian, Asialachian, West Virginian, etc. So we'll just take a moment now to get into those groups. Have one person record your responses and we'll report out into a Google Doc. I have the Google Doc set up here, and we'll figure that out.
Amanda, I put the link in the chat so they could get to it from the chat.
Perfect. So now I'm not sure how we do the breakout groups. Was that?
And
I'm here, Kathy, Amanda. It looks like I just assigned people.
Okay.
So I'm going to start the rooms. It should assign people automatically.
Fantastic. All right. And then we'll bring you back in 10 minutes, everyone.
It's still doing.
Okay.
It may take a second. I'm running a lot of things. There we go.
So have we been moved to a room? Hey, Jordan.
You have. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I am running tech on all 5 sessions, so I'm just in the room because it has to assign me. But if y'all need anything, just holler, okay? Cassie, let me know when you want me to send people back out of rooms, okay?
Great. Yeah, I'll text you in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Anne, are you still there? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, Amanda said that it did this to me too, but it sent me to a room where I was all by myself. And then it like kicked me out. So, or I don't know if I was just waiting for someone else, but
It may have been. At first, I was all by myself. Oh, it looks like. Well,
maybe she and I got sent to the same room, and then I left because I didn't have anybody, and I came back. So I'll just let her know to sign back in.
Okay. Let me see.
Okay. All right. So for the folks in here, I was trying to put into the chat the prompt for our piece right here, because we might have forgotten it. So I'm going to put it in the chat. So, and can we have somebody volunteer someone who has enough Wi-Fi to have Google Docs open at this time, volunteer to document what we catalog here today on the Google Doc?
I can do it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. So just follow that link. That should take you there. And I think we might have, I'll make another group just in case, but we might have 2 or 3 groups. But we can take group 1 if we want to catalog our stuff. Okay. So the question is, what words and phrases have you heard to describe geographic and identity relationships to the region? And this could be anywhere. This could be in scholarship. It can be in, music, popular media, just full, anything that you've heard that has to do with geography and identity to the Appalachian region. And thank you, Jordan, for being willing to scribe.
Well, I can start with how I describe myself. I describe myself as a newcomer, and what I didn't mention is that even though I lived in Appalachia, basically in Appalachia counties most of my life, I mean, I got my PhD at UK in Lexington. I went to college in Greenville, South Carolina, right up in the mountains there, and so I've always lived in the region. My roots are here. I mean, my roots are in West Virginia, on my mother's side, and Ohio on my dad's side. But anyways, I'm still a newcomer, even though I'm Appalachian. So, I don't know. So newcomer doesn't necessarily mean an outsider, I guess is what I'm saying. It might be you're locally an outsider.
Just a test. Can y'all hear me now? Okay, I found.
I can share. I was excited that Amanda included Mexalachen and like Asian Lachen, so designations that are gesturing towards, developing and emergent populations, but that also speak to a deeper multiracial and multicultural history in the region. So, I mean, I identify with the marker of Mexalachen. I mean, my mom used to joke with my sister and I about being half Mexican, half hillbilly. So that I would say as sort of a cultural or racial identity marker. And also, I think we can probably include hillbilly for all of its, complexities and the way it's been debated and used. But that certainly was something that has resonated for me in the connections to my maternal Appalachian hillbilly-ness with family roots in Eastern Kentucky. So I would say, yeah, Mexalachen, Mexican hillbilly, Latin Lachen. I mean, it's cool how the Appalachian sort of linguistically like invites some of these hybrid forms. So
I would like to piggyback off of that because I was thinking about how, we say Appalachian, but a lot of people who are from the region have a lot of different ways of pronouncing that word in general. And it would be cool to kind of include that. I have a friend who's from the Eastern Panhandle of Appalachia, grew up there her whole life, and she says Appalachian. So I think that including the different pronunciations of like the core word that we're kind of exploring at this conference too would be a good thing. But I also want to include when I was growing up, we always understood ourselves as holler kids, as opposed to the town kids. Not that they're like, not that it's a big town that I'm near, but it was very clear that we were from the holler. Oh, thank you for adding that, Cassie. And I think that's maybe, or like mountain kids. And then as I grew older and started to explore and interact with more people from around the state, I'm from Southern West Virginia. I came to know that I wasn't just a West Virginian, I was a Southern West Virginian, right? And all of that came with it. And a coal kid, So despite not really having family, well, I mean, I have family immediate. My parents weren't coal miners, so, and yet I'm still a coal kid.
I will piggyback off of that. So I am from Virginia, and I usually have to distinguish that I'm from Southwest Virginia and not from Northern Virginia because they are two very different things. And that for the good or bad of it. But also when you said that you're a Virginian, and I don't know if this applies to other states, but because of like the history of Virginia, as far as like Revolutionary War history and stuff, people get really wrapped up in being a Virginian, and that's cool. But I didn't really realize that I was Appalachian as opposed to being like Virginian or just Southern until I was in college and took an Appalachian history class, and I was like, wait a minute. This is cool. This is really who I am. I'm not Southern after all. So I feel like that having I don't know, some pride in your state, but definitely part of being the place-based part, or your pride in place. I have a history degree, so I do take pride in being a Virginian. But Appalachian, when I found out I was Appalachian, that was the end of it. It's been an obsession ever since.
I'd love to piggyback off that real quick just to say the same with Ohio, because and some of it is just Southern Ohio, which is very hilly and beautiful along the river. And then anytime I travel and they're like, Ohio, it's so flat, I'm like, no, you don't even know. But just thinking in terms of like when I first really understood that I was from Appalachia, Ohio, and my mother, who born and raised in the area, says Appalachia as well. But so Appalachian or Appalachian Ohioan, um, I think is really one way that I've started to sort of anchor myself, like it's so I can talk about like being Midwestern and Appalachian, and yes, the two converge. So but that's very like the same thing. It's like, no, I'm from Southern Ohio, I live in Central Ohio. It's very different from Northern or Northeast Ohio, like the make those distinctions very clear.
That's actually one of the things I found very interesting about your region. Being from Texas, and no one has gross nationalism and pride like us Texans. The it's the maps look bigger than they actually are, and how people choose to identify really surprises me, because within a 2 or 3/4 mile radius, you can have people that completely change identities. It's very surprising for me to be able to travel 20 minutes and be in a different state in any given direction. And what I'm hearing from y'all are exactly what I've been hearing in East Tennessee, and I've always found it very fascinating. I've only been here since January, so I'm still learning a lot of the terminology.
I want to, if I could say, I'm sorry, I wanted to say something about being Southern. I guess I had always originally identified as Southern. Only later, as I got older, did I realize that my Southernness was rooted in my Appalachian roots, and it's sort of like I've had more of an awakening to my Appalachian identity, but I still consider myself Southern.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for these ideas. We're going to get put back into the main room and where we can share out. So if somebody wants to think about offering to share out to the rest of the group, although I'm not sure who is actually missing, I'm not sure how the groups are breaking out, but if someone wants to be brave and share. Okay.
So I was the only person in my room, which means I'm the only person who has that opportunity. So words that we would use, and by we, I just mean the people that I talk to, I guess. Hispalachian, transplant, granny witch has even been thrown around. Had a little bit of a debate about whether or not that applies here. And queer Appalachian, I think were ones that my roommate and I bounced back and forth.
I'm glad you brought up the granny witch part. My my grandma was a granny woman, and I think they may have dropped the witch because of the connotations with witch. I hope we're not getting off track here, but it's just a part I'm interested in. I wish GoPro's cameras would have existed when I was a kid, so I could have had videos of her walking through the woods, helping her collect, Lord knows, everything from spider webs to roots to stuff that dirt daughters make nests out of, you know. But yeah, I've often kind of studied the whole witchcraft thing a lot, you know, because it's intriguing. Like, you know, driving past a car wreck thing, or you know, I'm thinking of Salem witch trials and the Spanish Inquisition in Europe. But yeah, I think that term witch got dropped a lot of places and turned into granny woman or even midwife, and it meant the same thing. But I just want to throw that in there, guys. But
now, question: when you're saying, are you talking about cunning folk, gray women? I'm trying to think of another term. Conjure folk.
So I've gone to a couple of gatherings and heard all of those terms as either a variation or a synonym. I think it's still perhaps an evolving language.
Yeah.
Well, it varies region. That's why I was really excited. A lot of families used to have something called granny books, and they were old collections of folk remedies. My grandmother had one too, and it was really cool because when you look through them, you had everyone's writing, and she had like her great grandmothers and aunts and everyone else that would be all bound up together like that.
Guys, I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but just unofficially, I've seen a lot of these terms change with where the families came from. You have your German immigrants, Irish. Well, Irish and Scots Irish, they tend to be a lot the same, even English. But if you come from the continent, or if the ancestors came from the continent of Europe, they to me they seem to use the same term or the same different terms to describe the same situation. So conjurers and so forth. But that's just my personal experience. I don't have anything to back that up. If that
Am I able to add something, Cassie and Amanda? So one of the things that it didn't come out in our rooms, but that I think it's important to acknowledge too, which came from a panel this morning with on the status of race, and came from 4 prominent Black men, Appalachian scholars, talking about the rural-urban divide and what that means for people's identity formation too. And so something that was always a thread in my upbringing here in Appalachian, Ohio, but that is sort of has been increasingly suburbanized over my lifetime, is that my family has a small farm, and so I always had connections to agriculture and felt very rooted in those traditions and practices, often characterized as Appalachian, animal husbandry, crops, all of these things, which is something that a lot of my peers and classmates did not share. So I think even designations like being a farm kid versus being a townie were very present in the formation of my social and peer relationships, especially in high school. I mean, I was a lifetime 4-H'er. And so I felt very, very much, and I mean, different sort of politics of identity, I guess, because I was a 4-H'er, but I also did other things like music and some more academic oriented things. But I think that that's, especially for young people, that the sort of town country divide, which looks a lot different now in the wake of like more sprawling suburbanization and gentrification and all of this, that was definitely a part of my story.
I'll follow up on that. I grew up in a farm town, and my graduating class had about 65 people in it, so it was really small. But just 15 minutes from here from where I live, is Virginia Tech, which has 30 to 50,000 kids. And so it was a huge, I don't know, it's just a big jump for a kid who grew up in the middle of nowhere. My town has gotten to be much more suburban and has kind of feeding into Virginia Tech now. It's where people come to live if they work there. But there was also like a difference, even living in a farm town, between, I didn't grow up on a farm, but between like my friends lived on a farm, and you knew the difference. So even in such a small, like a small class of kids, we knew that there was a difference there too.
Oh, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was gonna piggyback on that as well. I grew up in New Boston, which is in between two parts of the city of Portsmouth, and even like it was very much town, although you could just cross the street and be lost in the woods, you know, because the hillside. And when I talk about Portsmouth now, especially in circles outside, or people who aren't necessarily like focused on Appalachia, and they're like, "Oh yeah, rural places," and I was like, "No, no, no." I mean, they exist there, but one of the things that you know, I like to look at with Appalachia is really like how quickly you can get to that. Like, there's like, it's urban, boom, it's not urban, like it's really that quick. Whereas like in the city I live in now, like you have to go, even going to a metro park is very, it's just not, to find natural spaces especially, and I wouldn't call them rural of course, but there's not that same kind of, and I don't even know if it's like, I wouldn't call it integration essentially, but that juxtaposition of rural with urban I think is really interesting. And again, I don't have a language for it. That's, you know, kind of the terms that we have to generate, but I keep coming back to the word convergence for so many of these things, where that urban and that rural kind of converge.
These are such excellent reflections, and we're getting a lot of great terms on the Google Doc. And before we kind of move on to thinking about generating terms, I just want to think, you know, are there any terms that are striking you as being, you know, ones that you want to affirm or kind of interrogate a little bit more? Or are you noticing any gaps that you think we need to fill here? And I think, Amanda, you just articulated one of them, this idea of convergence, or in terms of proximity of different kinds of landscapes, even.
One of the words that comes to mind when you're describing that situation, and again, not necessarily a term, but maybe something that we can kind of use. One of the words that we use is juxtaposed. Sorry about the car in the background. But like juxtaposed, or a juxtaposition of like two things that like take on a new meaning because they are next to each other. And so I think that kind of describes that unique experience of like, you know, there's a difference between farm kid and, you know, the other kids in school, and you can tell, but you're still the same too. Like each experience defines the other.
I like that you brought up that, you know, to me that suggests the idea of relationality, you know, the idea of juxtaposition, but also like the idea of relationality, you know, potentially existing both within and outside of hierarchical relationships, and being able, like, relationality helps us to look at power dynamics, or look at the ways that people, you know, want to attach to terms and words, or the ways that they reject them.
I'm sorry, is this where we start? Is this where we would, instead of breaking out into rooms, are we at the time where we would go to do the affirm? Is that where we're at? I can't.
Yeah, I think we are, Amanda.
Okay.
I think we decided just to skip the breakout because we're a small enough group that it might just be easier to talk here.
Yeah. Agreed.
Do you want to bring up the slide? Actually, I forgot about that.
That's what I was trying to decide. Let's see if it'll let me. It will not let me now because I signed back in. It says only meeting organizers and presenters can share.
Okay, I'll put the question
hang on.
in the
I think
chat.
I can make you an organizer.
Yeah, you can.
Well, not an organizer, but a presenter.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Yep.
Oh, good.
Just a second. And I am in the Google Doc, and now we're over here. You guys get to see my bajillion tabs. Okay. Can you see it? I just have to get to the next slide. The desired terminology is where we're at. Here. Correct?
Yeah, so so instead of well, let me see. We were going to do this in breakout rooms. It doesn't quite work in terms of bolding anymore, but the idea is that we want to think about, of the terms that we've generated, that you generated in your breakout rooms, which are ones that you want to affirm and you want to see kind of continually used and maybe refined. Which ones do you think need immediate refining and kind of breaking down? And that kind of connects to what Amanda was saying earlier about the term refugee. You know, is this an appropriate term for this relationship that I'm experiencing? And what terminology do we need to generate to be able to fill gaps in the ways that people are relating to place in Appalachia?
I can share. Should I
And
just?
I can take notes.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say I can share the Google Doc now if we just want to look at what we've got and start to, like, can you guys see? How's that? You see it?
Yeah, great
Okay.
idea, Amanda. And I'll take notes for the things that we end up generating. Or I can bold what people want me to bold.
I'd be interested in hearing more thoughts on the term hillbilly. I've heard a lot of people who embrace it, adore it, put it on their t-shirts. Some people that seem to try to sway away from it, and others that are just like, if you're not Appalachian, I don't want to hear it. So, thoughts maybe?
That's interesting because it makes me, for some reason, I haven't really thought about this too much, but I associate hillbilly and redneck. And did redneck make it on here anywhere? Like, is that, and it's very similar when I hear people talk about it. It's like, you don't get to say it unless you're from a rural area, or you don't get to, it's some people embrace it and others do not. So I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know if you have associations or anyone else has associations with hillbilly and redneck and how they seem to be maybe.
I would offer the observation that hillbilly in particular, at least in my perspective, is racialized in a way that, as white, in a way that Appalachian has been used by people of color to be more expansive. Specifically thinking about, like the Appalachian poets and Appalachian writers who have, taken to the marker of Appalachia, that as opposed to hillbilly. And I mean, I don't, know the exact reasons for that, but I do think that hillbilly carries with it sort of more potent connotations of whiteness, at least in the way that it's been written about or represented in popular culture, versus Appalachian, which I think people have intentionally argued for in a more sort of, like, I want to say the word worldly way, I guess, like the ability of Appalachian as an identity marker to like do more work for non-white people than hillbilly. So I think some of like the directions of what needs to happen maybe is to consider the way that, Appalachians of color and other groups of marginalized Appalachians, how they, like, the words that they choose to claim, and perhaps what those are revealing or teaching, white Appalachians. I would just say that some of these words are also, I guess it's just about a bigger conversation about how some of them are racialized in maybe more explicit ways than others.
Yeah, I will add to that. It's been very interesting to see how like certain words hold these larger connotations in the national imaginary of what people in place are. And I think, Sophia, you're really right about hillbilly being racialized as white and becoming more of like a nicer way of saying white trash a lot of the time. In the early to mid 2000s, the anti-mountaintop removal activist movement tried to reclaim hillbilly. as a endangered species, which is interesting. They sold, I think Coal River Mountain Watch sold shirts that said "Save the Endangered Hillbilly." Removal. But even more recently, redneck has been kind of reclaimed from this more negative connotation to more aligning with like intersectional feminist causes, to be more inclusive and calling on the folklore of the intersectional organizing of the redneck movement of the mine wars of the 1920s, and trying to form like coalitions for action across racial and gender divides. Of course, we know that the white miner men were still centered in that. So there's still this kind of turn to romanticize that kind of organizing in a term. But it's interesting to see how reclamation is happening too. And I think the Appalachian poets are reclaiming the word Appalachian as well in that. So.
I see somebody has their hand up, but my Teams is loading slowly, so I can't see you, but go ahead and share.
If I could just add on that, the term hillbilly has been around so long, used so many ways. Having lived in northern Appalachia and spent a lot of time in southern PA and the northern part of West Virginia, and then down here in southern Appalachia, I see it used in many different ways. A lot of times it's just the context of the conversation. It's also redneck, hillbilly, very interchangeable down here, and it can be bad or good depending on how it's used. You can certainly call yourself that, but you have to be guarded on how you refer to someone else with either of those terms. And I know I'm 56 years old, so I know my perspective is different than the way a lot of things are seen now, and that's cool. And I don't ever want to think just because this is my perspective, this is the way it is. But guys, in the 80s, when I first joined the Army, early 80s, hillbilly was just what they called everybody from the South. You could have been from the coast in Florida, you were a hillbilly. Sandra Ballard does a really good job of breaking down the origin of hillbilly and how it's perceived very broadly in ASA, where the hillbillies come from. But it's part of a bigger collection. I can't think of the name of the book. But I see those terms that are used in so many different ways in different locations. It's definitely, redneck is really taking a turn for the right, as far as I think the way a lot of people use the word. I don't know, down here anyway, hillbilly hasn't really fared that bad, mainly because it's we're in a different area. We don't have coal. We don't have a lot of associations with what's going on with the post-coal era. We mine tourists here, and that brings a whole another set of problems. But I won't say not nearly as bad in some ways. But yeah, I just want to throw that in there that these terms just mean so many different things in so many different ways generally. Thank you. I'm done now, Sue.
No, I wanted to say that that's really interesting in thinking in terms of how it's used in context of like who's saying it to who, if you're self-identifying. I think that's really interesting. And the same, I added white trash to the collection there, even though it just feels really weird to write in there at all. But I wanted to skip over too, thinking about the holler kids and the holler piece. And I was just thinking I'm on that email list for Charles Booker's Hood to the Holler campaign, and I didn't know if anyone, if there's something there with what we were talking about earlier with that that relationship, right? Like the when we think about urban areas and rural areas and that connection that he had made between the two. But I don't know if that's like Hood to the Holler is something to put in here. It's not really it's more of a slogan than it is like terminology. But maybe that's something we should look at too. I'm not sure.
When I was a kid living in Southern Ohio, we had city kids and county kids. And county kids are holler kids if you live in Ashland or Moorhead.
Thanks, Amope. And I know you're an expert quilter as well. And I wonder if are there any kind of like material culture relationships that you think we should reflect here in this terminology?
Well, I don't call myself a master nothing, except I've lived long enough to have people young enough that I can feel like I've lived a long time. And my experience with the needle is you're talking about material culture. When I was the summer that I was 10, now that I understand what rites of passages are, I had one. I called it being porched. I didn't get to swim. I didn't get to hang out with my friends. But the women in my mother's family were preparing me for womanhood. That was the summer I learned about washing out your rags, even though thank God I didn't have to do that. But I had to get the Kotex belt in the 6th grade when they let all the boys go to the gym class. So we had sex education, but it was about menstruation. That's what it was about. And they gave it to us as health, science, reproductive system stuff. So I came out of high school in 1970. So this would have been at the time that Kennedy was assassinated. I was in the 6th grade. So I learned how to do everything with a needle the summer I was 10. Crochet, knit, darn. People don't even darn anymore. Embroider, making all them fancy knots and stuff. And everybody had a crocheted dresser cloth or doilies under the lamps. And I was expected to know how to do all that and take care of my own hair. And now that I'm grown, I realize that was the summer that my mother's and her sisters invested in me. You know, I was one of them kids who was given the kit and I kept it in a drawer like a sacred place, waiting to bloom into womanhood. You know, it was a successful myth. I never had the cramps. Oh, well, I had a miscarriage and then I had the cramps, but them girls would talk about the cramps and I'd be like, you know, I'm a flower. I'm able to become a mother. And so the motherhood, womanization, socialization piece, and the only place you get some power as a woman was in the church. So, you know, if you're going to have some power, you can at least start being a mission sister or a usher or a member of the choir. So the material culture for me, let me back out and say, I had a conversation yesterday. I was listening to a conversation. I listened to the Blacks in Appalachia podcast. I saw the old icons and I saw some of the young people I knew, and I was like, y'all didn't ask me my opinion, but anyway. But I enjoyed watching that because the experience that they have of not feeling included was never my experience with ASA. Never. I came in knowing who I was, and I know it's hard for them to understand. And saw that word hillbilly. I knew I was a hillbilly before I understood what it meant in the greater culture to be Black. I had to learn how to be Black. I learned how to be Black while I was in college. But I knew when I went away, because people say I talk funny. You know, I was wearing feathers in my hair. I was a hippie and never been to Woodstock. They couldn't understand, you know. I believed that everything was unified. And you a Christian and you believe that, and you ain't a Muslim? No, I'm just a person from Southern Ohio who know how to eat and how to cure yourself without having to go to the doctor. So when you say material culture for me, because I realized last night I'm not a scholar. If that means spending your time documenting why what you say is true, no, I'm not a scholar. You know, if that means I get to be defined as expressing an artistic, creative experience, okay, then As Gail Lamberger said to me one time, I'm okay, we ain't worried about getting PhDs. We're gonna be the research topics. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. You know? So I don't understand exactly that. As a sociologist, I understand material is something I'm supposed to be able to touch. But what makes me Appalachian ain't nothing that I can touch. It's hard to explain. You know, we do speak English, but unless the person has a shared experience, you really have to imagine what their story is. So I've told people when I was teaching at Cincinnati State Community College, I would run this cultural survey, but I did it by asking them to go ahead and share their suppositions about me. Look at me and tell me who you think I am. And I would say, okay, what's my favorite music? You like soul, you like rhythm and blues? They're like, no. And when they would hear me say, you know, just give me a banjo and a fiddle, them kids would go, and I would say, I told you not to be confused by the color of my skin. It's about culture. It ain't about what color you are. I learned the only difference between the way my mama cooked pinto beans and the quote folk in the county cooked pinto beans. They put potatoes in theirs. They had more people to feed. It's the same. What's the difference between white gravy and brown gravy? Whether you got a cow in the backyard or not. Because milk was expensive. City people wasn't eating milk gravy. You can't afford milk. Not to put in gravy. You got to put milk in cereal. You know? So I understood who I was before the world told me who I was. When my teacher said I had no history, I knew she was lying. Because my grandpa had told me everything he knew about all the people he knew. I'd been to those places. I'd seen them with my own eyes. So, you know, I think what I would say is anybody is just looking to make their story legit. And the way it becomes legit is people accept that it's your truth. They don't have to be their truth. You know, I don't want to have to convince anybody that I am what I am. I don't need to convince anybody. Um, so I don't have the angst of the youth. And I'm much more like Wilburn said, he went away to school, met Helen Lewis on an internship, and realized he had a right to the landscape. I knew I had a right to the landscape because I played on it. I understand now how the value of being able to go up on the hill by yourself was a rite of passage, and now kids can't do that because US 52 cuts across the hill. I understand how walking, you know, when we heard people talking about walking miles to school and back, yeah, we didn't walk miles, but we sure did figure out who we were and what our relationships were to each other and what our responsibilities were within the group by being unsupervised and walking to school together. So that when we went, quote, downtown to the movie theater, we all knew that the oldest person with us was in charge of all of us. And if they didn't take care of any problems that rose up, and our parents found out that we'd had a problem downtown amongst them people who they all knew, that they weren't going to ask who was guilty. They was going to just take care of everybody. So the way we thought collectively, the way we shared collectively, but without legal segregation, what segregated us mostly was religion. And even within the subset of African descended people, it was still religion and how much physical or emotional expression you were able to exert on Sunday to get clean so you could go back into the society on Monday. So maybe that answers your question, and maybe I said too much, but them is my words, and you can quote me.
Thank you,
Because I stand for that, you know. But I'm sorry that I came in so late. I've been clearing because I got this 12:30 session, and just didn't want to miss the opportunity to pop in and say thank you all for this conversation, because language and words is my thing. And I know my language is archaic, and that's all right with me.
Well, we're really appreciative for your contributions here. And I think you set us up well to, we have 3 more minutes here. And, how do we want to, think about our reflection here together going forward? There are a lot of spaces where we see this terminology coming up, where we see these relationships surfacing. Some of those might be ones that we're generating for ourselves in our personal lives, as Amopa is talking about. It might be within our friend groups. It might be terms that are articulated for us, for others, or ones that we use strategically in our work. So are there any final thoughts that people have about the words and the terms and relationships that we've discussed here that you want to leave us with?
I just want to say I feel really empowered listening to all of you. Words are important, and thank you for letting me be part of this conversation.
I think listening especially to, Amope, your reflections, the idea about giving people's truths space in language, I think that's so important for us to feel comfortable listening to those truths and to those words, and allowing the multiplicity of language and those truths and potential ambiguities or things that aren't clear, letting those kind of be, because I think just this conversation in itself has shown there really is no fixed sort of curated way to approach the region, the way we talk about people in it and from it and ourselves. So yeah, I think that was a powerful sentiment, is about letting people's truths speak for themselves in whatever ways they choose, which doesn't come without its limitations, I suppose, in terms of the way that you all started the conversation, Amanda and Cassie, by bringing up this example of refugee, right? Because that's sort of invoking a broader national and international conversation that's directly impacting racialized people, and what would it mean to like invoke that word in the context of Appalachia, where there are migrants and refugees whose experience is different than that of someone who maybe like someone who leaves and then comes back. So anyways, lots to think about.
Amanda, you want to take us home?
Sure. Sure. Let me just wait. Am I out of share? I don't know if I'm really taking us home. I will just say that this has been terrific today. I have really learned a lot from you all, and I'm going to be just making mad crazy notes when we get out of this session to collect some of this. This has been truly inspiring. I appreciate your participation 100%. Thank you so much for coming today.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. It sure was nice. It was an honor to be here. Y'all have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to see you all.
I love Carrie Curley. I'm going to have to put you in a story.
I was just thinking of the term porched and how that was my favorite term for today, and I want to put it in a story if you don't mind.
No, sir, I don't mind, because that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Some people would call it confinement. But I couldn't get off the porch. Every vessel was held on the porch. The porch that's a whole essay, what the porch meant in my home. You know, the old people sit on their own porch. Every other person had a radio, and they all listened to the baseball game together up and down the street. You know, while we played in our pajamas, played hide and seek. This is more stories to come. Love you all. Be well. Come to mine at 12:30 if you can.
All right.
And it's archived, so you can.
All right. See y'all.